Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about the pollution in the Sabarmati River. We also talk about a new pension model by the Andhra Pradesh government. But first, we talk about Turkey. On Monday morning, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake shook Turkey and Syria. As people reeled from the shock, multiple aftershocks, close to over 70 in 30 hours, rocked Turkey and Syria, and the reverberations reached as far as Cairo. As of Tuesday evening, the death toll was estimated at over 5,000. Turkey has not seen an earthquake of this magnitude in a century, despite being in a seismically active zone. To understand the science behind these big earthquakes, we speak to the Indian Express's Amitabh Sinha in this episode. So Amitabh, the first earthquake that hit Turkey was of 7.8 magnitude, and it caused a lot of destruction in the area. So earthquakes this big, are they common or is this a rare event?
So earthquakes are pretty common on any given day around the world. There would be thousands of measurable earthquakes, and I'm talking about earthquakes which are maybe 2.5 magnitude or higher. They can easily be detected. So on any given day, on an average, there would be thousands of these. Higher magnitude earthquakes are fewer, and the kind of earthquake that we saw in Turkey, that's roughly only about 8 to 10 times or maybe 12 times a year. An 8 plus earthquake is pretty rare, and on an average we see about 1, 2 or 3 8 plus earthquakes every year. Again, that's the recent experience. The largest earthquakes have been 9 plus, very few of them, and they are extremely rare, of course.
Yeah, in fact, so far only 4 earthquakes have been recorded that are of magnitude 9 and above. But talking about Turkey and Syria, we understand that they are in seismically active regions. So could you explain what a seismically active region is and what exactly causes earthquakes?
So, it's the geology inside the earth. There are ruptures. The interior of the earth is not even, and it's not one solid block. There are different blocks. And wherever these blocks meet, they are referred to in different names, plates as they are called, tectonic plates. So wherever they meet, there are fault lines that emerge, and there is a lot of pushing around happening. And once in a while, it results in the kind of earthquakes that we are talking about. So these are the areas where these fault lines exist. These are the areas which are generally, seismically more active. So we know exactly where the fault lines are, and therefore we know we have been able to map out areas which are more earthquake prone. And usually the earthquakes originate from these areas where you have these fault lines. And depending on the strength of the earthquake or how deep it originates, it spreads to a larger sort of an area. But the origins mostly lie around the fault lines. And as you have read about this event in Turkey, again, it originated from a region where there are known fault lines, and there are a few, tectonic plates active in that region. There is the what is known as the Arabian plate, there is the African plate, there is the Eurasian plate, and there are slightly minor tectonic plates, smaller ones, where this particular one has originated. So most of northern Turkey, central and eastern parts of Turkey, they lie in that region. And so that's an earthquake prone region because of the fact that there is a fault line that exists.
Okay, so considering this, are earthquakes of this magnitude common in this region?
So, 7 plus is fairly common in a lot of other places. Japan, for example, the Himalayan regions, Peru, lots of these seismically active areas, produce earthquakes, rather big earthquakes, fairly routinely. Routinely as in every 1 or 2 years, you have these kind of earthquakes in these regions. But Turkey is not the place where you can expect this big an earthquake. So in that ways, this particular event is quite unusual.
Also, Amitabh, do these fault lines or the epicenter of the earthquakes help us in predicting the kind of damage that the area will experience?
So there are several factors that influence the kind of devastation that is caused by an earthquake. How big the earthquake is, that refers to the magnitude. So these earthquake travel in waves. It's seismic waves. And if you're familiar, if you've seen the sine waves, the waves go up and down, the waveform. And the magnitude actually refers to how big the size of the wave is. So a magnitude 7 earthquake would have a higher amplitude than a magnitude 5 earthquake. The other factor, of course, and this is much more crucial, is the amount of energy that it carries. Now, energy is actually the strength. And the higher the energy, the greater is its devastation potential. So when it originates, the wave has the highest energy. And as it travels through the ground, it loses energy. So once, if an earthquake originates at, say, 25 kilometers below the surface, it has to travel 25 kilometers to reach the surface. And it loses some amount of energy in making that travel. If the same earthquake was located, say, 100 kilometers below the Earth's surface, it would have to travel 100 kilometers and would lose much of its energy or larger amount of energy in that process. So by that, logic, earthquakes that are shallow, which means they are nearer to the Earth's surface, they have a higher devastation potential.
Right. And natural disasters for the longest time were unpredictable. But now we can warn people about tsunamis, floods, and other events. But to what extent can we do that with earthquakes?
So we are certainly not near anywhere predicting an earthquake. What we can do, as we discussed earlier, is to map out the areas that are more likely to produce earthquakes. And that's based on measurement of the kind of energy that is stored inside, the kind of plates and the kind of forces that are at play in that particular region. What is the size of the plates and how hard is it pushing in one particular direction. So those things are measurable, and we are able to map out the areas which are more dangerous or more prone to earthquakes. So that this area will have an earthquake in future. And there has been work going on for decades now trying to look for telltale signs before an earthquake. So those can be used as predictors. We in India also, it's a very famous site where these kind of experiments have been going on for years. There is a place called Koina in Maharashtra, not very far from Bombay and Pune. It's a seismically active area, and scientists have been looking for predictors. What comes just ahead of the earthquake? Do we know whether there are any telltale signs that take place just before an earthquake happens? Until now, nothing like that has been found. So there is no way till now that earthquakes can be predicted.
And next we talk about the Sabarmati River, which is an integral part of Gujarat's Ahmedabad city. Initially, it was the city's primary water source. Sabarmati is also known for being the river from where Mahatma Gandhi began his salt march during the freedom struggle. And now the river is in the news again for a completely different reason. A report by the Central Pollution Control Board, or CPCB, listed Sabarmati as the second most polluted river in the country. The findings of the November 2022 report were quoted by the Union Ministry of Jal Shakti in the Lok Sabha last week, which brought the issue to the limelight. To know what the report says and the current situation of Sabarmati, we speak to the Indian Express's Sohini Ghosh in this segment. So Sohini, the CPCB report said that Sabarmati recorded an alarming level of BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand. So can you first tell us what is BOD?
So BOD is basically your biochemical oxygen demand, and it's in a way used to determine the water quality. So what BOD measure tells us is that the amount of oxygen that is being consumed by the microorganisms in the water body in the process of decomposition. So decomposition requires oxygen. So the more of your microorganisms are present or there is stuff that is decomposing in the water body, you would end up having a higher BOD, biochemical oxygen demand. The water body is demanding more oxygen to carry out the processes. So basically it's used often as a ballpark measure of how polluted or clean a water body is. And the CPCB report basically took BOD parameter as the defining parameter for measuring all the spots that they monitored.
And what did the report say about the level of pollution in the river?
So essentially, it monitored the stretch from Raisen, which is in Gandhinagar district of Gujarat, up to downstream spot of Vatha, which is on the outskirts of Ahmedabad district. And in this stretch, the CPCB report finds that the BOD was basically at 292 milligrams per liter. That's how much oxygen per liter of water is demanding. And to give a bit of a perspective, so CPCB considers BOD, which is less than 3 milligrams per liter, as not polluted. So here we have practically almost 100 times more of that level. This was broadly CPCB's finding, and this basically puts the river stretch as the second most polluted river stretch across the country of all the spots that were monitored by CPCB for this report.
Well, Sohini, this report actually backs what the Gujarat High Court has been saying over the past year about the level of pollution in Sabarmati. In fact, the High Court also directed the government and the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation to take certain actions to clean up the river. Can you talk to us about these directions?
So one of the first thing that Gujarat High Court had directed was the constitution of a joint task force committee of independent members and experts in this subject area to actually get scientific data on the extent of pollution. And once that came on the court's record, the court realized that there are a lot of unauthorized illegal connections from residential buildings, from industrial units who have never taken any permission to connect to the treatment plants, and yet they have connected their respective discharges. And that in turn is damaging your treatment plants. So sewage treatment plants or STPs, they are supposed to treat your domestic wastewater and sewage water. And CETPs or common effluent treatment plants, they are supposed to take care of your industrial wastewater. And in both type of treatment systems, it was found that they were working at suboptimal level. The efficiency was very low. So practically the wastewater that was being discharged into this treatment plants by, say, the residential buildings or by the industrial units were practically getting dumped as it is into the river, because more or less there was no treatment happening within these plants. They had almost become defunct or very suboptimal efficiency and operation.
And what did the court do after all these came to light?
So once that came to light, the court took to task AMC, which is the Ahmedabad civic body, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, and Gujarat Pollution Control Board, which is supposed to monitor such kind of activities and also keep a check on industries. Those who have permission to connect to the treatment plants, even they should be monitored periodically if they are actually adhering to the parameters for which they had taken permission, pollution parameters. And none of this was being done. So the court took to task both AMC and GPCB on these failures, ordered them to immediately take action, start prosecution under the respective laws available to them. AMC took up a drive to shut down a lot of these illegal connections. AMC also took up a drive along with the police and GPCB to shut down industrial units, even those who have permissions, but are not adhering to the pollution standards.
Right. And while these were going on, The state government also invested a considerable amount in cleaning up the river and organizing cleaning drives. Did they have any desired outcome?
So there are two types of cleaning. Basically, one of it is removing the floating waste. So that, according to Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, they end up cleaning nearly 6,000 to 7,000 tons of floating waste in a given year. And in terms of expenditure or cleaning drives, it's more or less a continuous process, which we especially see happening during any VIP events or VIP guests visiting the city. In July 2022, it was submitted before the Rajya Sabha that almost rupees 282 crores has been spent on cleaning the Sabarmati river in 3 years. And as part of that Rajya Sabha reply, which was nearly a year ago, a 155 MLD STP at Pirana was being set up for 151 crore rupees. So those projects keep on going. We don't have the latest figure on what the expenditure has been as on date.
Right. So Sohini, what is the current situation of the Sabarmati river?
So, as on date, the pollution continues. And this is on record of the court. So, something that environmentalist says here, one of them we spoke to for this story, he's also part of the Joint Task Force Committee that was constituted by the Gujarat High Court in 2021. So what he says is that the river does not have a natural flow, an ecological flow, owing to urbanization and how the whole water flow is controlled through the Narmada network. So when it does not have an ecological flow, it cannot rejuvenate naturally, because otherwise for a natural river, it can take on a certain level of pollution because it replenishes itself. So since it cannot rejuvenate itself, what the environmentalist says is that we should not just be focusing on the part about meeting the parameters that say your mercury level should be this much, your chromium level should be this much, your BOD should be this much, your dissolved oxygen level should be this much. Just looking at the parameters is not enough, because ultimately if your load, the amount of waste you're putting into the river remains the same or unchanged, any sort of fluctuation or change in that BOD level is not going to sustain. So for example, if today the BOD level is managed from 292 milligrams per liter to say 100 milligrams per liter, but your load, the amount of waste that's ending up in the river remains unchanged, ultimately that change in the BOD, that improvement in BOD is not going to be sustainable, because that load of waste is ultimately going to decompose, and again a year later we are going to end up at 292 300 mg per liter. So now the court has again sent the industries back to sit down with AMC and GPCB and figure out a model wherein they would be subjected, the industries would be subjected to regular testing of the discharge. AMC would also conduct regular checks on the outfalls from their treatment plants, from AMC's treatment plants, basically the water that is going into the river after treatment. And GPCB too has to figure out how to monitor the illegal connections along with AMC, while also keeping a check on the pollution parameters. So as on date, the pollution level more or less remains the same. The pollution load remains more or less the same. And if AMC's version is to be gone by, they claim that they are pushing up their expenditure on fixing the STPs and CTPs and setting up new STPs. But on ground, it's really not showing much of an effect at this stage.
And in the end, we talk about a new pension model. While the entire country continues debating on the old versus the new pension scheme, the Andhra Pradesh government proposed a new model and named it the Guaranteed Pension Scheme, or GPS. Now, this GPS is a combination of both the OPS and the NPS. This model has caught the attention of the union government and also raises some concerns regarding its feasibility. In this segment, the Indian Express's Vaidyanathan Iyer joins us to talk about this model. So, Vaidi, could you begin by talking about this new pension model GPS?
So Andhra's model is a guaranteed pension scheme, which is different from the old pension scheme, that it says that it does not guarantee you 50% of the last drawn salary as the pension. The old pension scheme does that. The old pension scheme says that 50% of your last drawn salary would be your pension. And it goes on to also say that this 50% pension is also reviewed every 6 months. Adherence allowance is added to compensate for the cost of living or the inflation, etc., etc. So under the old pension scheme, the amount keeps increasing. But under the guaranteed pension scheme, which Andhra seems to offer, it is not 50%. So they give you two options. I think one is 33% and another is 40%, which are lesser than the 50% which the old pension scheme offers.
Okay, so you are saying that the guaranteed pension scheme is taking a leaf out of the OPS and guaranteeing definite benefits to a government employee. But unlike the OPS, pensions will not increase under the GPS and the employees can only draw a fixed amount after retirement.
Right. That's right.
But according to the GPS, the government will also have the contribution component, which means both the government and the employee will contribute the same amount towards their pension. Now, the new pension scheme, which was implemented by the central government in 2004, also says the same thing. Then how is Andhra's model different from the NPS?
So the new pension scheme essentially is something where the government and the employee both contribute. So 10% was the contribution which was fixed earlier in 2004. All of this went towards several funds. There are many pension funds which were set up, from private pension funds to public pension funds. Say, for instance, public sector banks and LIC have their own pension funds. Private sector financial institutions like HDFC and ICICI have their own pension funds. So employees get an option to park their contributions towards the pension fund in one of these funds. And it keeps accumulating over a period of time till they retire. So these are not guaranteed. The biggest thing is the contribution is defined in the sense that, you made 10% employer and employee, but the benefit is not defined. That is, the pension outgo at the end of service is not defined. So that depends on the market returns that are offered over a period of time.
Okay, so the GPS is trying to avoid this dependency on the market, and that's how it differs from the NPS. Now, their model has caught the attention of the union government. Can you tell us why?
So the Andhra model caught the government's attention because of two things. One, that it is a combination of the OPS and the new pension scheme, in that it talks about contribution by both the employer and the employee. The guaranteed pension scheme talks about contribution from the employee as well as the employer. So that's one very interesting feature. The second interesting feature is something which plays on the minds of government employees when you talk about the new pension scheme, which is completely linked to markets and completely technically, hypothetically, the market returns can be very low. It may not be so in reality, but hypothetically, it can be very low. So the employee always feels that he or she is subject to the vagaries of the market. In reality, it may not be so, but still, there's that psychological fear. So Andhra Pradesh government says, okay, I will promise you, I'll guarantee you 33% of your basic salary as pension or 40% of your basic salary as pension, depending on the contribution that you make towards your pension fund. So the two options where 33% of the basic salary is promised, both the employer and the employee make 10% contribution of their monthly basic salary towards pension. And under the 40% of basic salary as pension guarantee, the employer and the employee make 14% of the basic salary as the monthly contribution. So that is this, combination of two elements of OPS and NPS, contributions by both and guarantee by the government. So it suddenly, makes it appear that, wow, what a scheme this is. But it may not be so. It is slightly misleading.
And why do you think the scheme is misleading, Vaidi?
See, when you come down to doing the math in this, the arithmetic in this, it doesn't look possible. It doesn't say, okay, I contribute 10%, government contributes 10%. Can I get 33% of my basic salary? So where are they going to invest? Are they going to invest in bank deposits, which gives you, only a certain percentage? Are they going to just keep it with the government of Andhra Pradesh and later on say that, okay, I'll pay 33%? Then it is again very akin to the old pension system where the liability just keeps adding up. So you haven't done what you do with the funds that you are collecting over a long period of time of 25, 30 years. And how do you promise that 33% of the basic salary as returns, as a pension? That is number one. Second, the Andhra government's claim that, the new pension system will deliver only 20% is such an exaggerated claim. And it is not true. The new pension scheme, of course, it depends on the markets, but we have to go by past instances or what has happened so far. So far, the new pension system, the fund monies invested in pension funds has given a return of 9.6% on an average. And if you put it in equity, the returns might be higher. And that roughly translates 9.6% returns, which pension funds have consistently delivered over a period of time. That roughly translates into 40% of your basic salary as pension, which is quite phenomenal. And the government has intervened already, said in 2019 that I'm going to increase my contribution towards your pension also. So it is possible. I don't know whether it is in the government's, is there a proposal or even the government is discussing about it. From what I know, the government is not discussing about it so far. But it is possible that the government says, okay, I will increase my contribution further from 14% to 16% or to 17% so that the employees can benefit from the power of compounding. Such small increases in monthly contributions over a period of time can be much larger in terms of their impact on the corpus. So I think if you do the math, sit down, figure out the actuarial calculations in this over long periods of time, taking into account, lifespans of people, taking into account certain increases which the government has to do, then I think new pension scheme, there is no way that any government should look at one reverting to the old pension scheme or looking at a guaranteed version of combining the two and doing trying to mislead.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by Utsa Sarmin with the help of Anwiti Singh and Shashank Bhargava. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend this show to someone who you think will like it and share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.